Buckingham Palace has just detonated the rumor nobody inside the royal machine wanted dragged into daylight. King Charles is stepping back, Prince William and Catherine are moving toward the center, and buried inside the paperwork is a restriction leaving Camilla staring at a door slammed shut after the decision was sealed. For weeks, Charles had projected stability desk photographs, red boxes, assurances, controlled appearances, but behind that polished image, cancellations multiplied, ceremonies shrank, and Prince William absorbed more of the public burden. Then came the rehearsal in London, a ceremony meant to project effortless continuity across London. Charles arrived determined to push through, yet witnesses described a collapse in stamina. His color faded, his concentration slipped, the room was cleared, and Charles's doctors issued a blunt warning. Continue forcing the schedule and the recovery itself could be jeopardized. That triggered an emergency gathering at Buckingham Palace where William, Catherine, Princess Anne, and constitutional advisors were called in without explanation. The question became impossible to ignore. Had Charles chosen William and Catherine over Camilla? Crown Watch viewers were asked exactly that before the sealed folder appeared. William initially believed it concerned canceled engagements. Catherine thought the shift might be temporary. But Charles opened the royal continuity and succession order and revealed something much bigger. State audiences, senior appointments, ceremonial planning, and long-term direction would move directly to William, while Catherine would take on responsibilities associated with the reigning queen, including state banquets, diplomatic receptions, and the public program across Britain and the Commonwealth. Catherine froze. Catherine understood instantly how every future appearance could be recast as a declaration. William pushed back. William feared the public would interpret the transfer as ambition. Charles insisted it was his choice. Charles said protecting the monarchy could no longer mean pretending nothing had changed. Then, Anne changed everything by placing another folder on the table. Inside were confidential plans from Camilla's household showing how Camilla could preserve influence if Charles withdrew, retain a hand in ceremonies and appointments, and frame William's expanded control as temporary even during a months-long absence. William read the page twice. Catherine stayed still. Charles had not approved the discussions. Camilla's office had been preparing an advisory arrangement centered on Clarence House, with influence over diaries, banquets, and ceremonial decisions. Camilla's people wanted consultation, and Camilla appeared positioned to keep a hand on the machinery even while Camilla remained outside the formal transfer. William's authority was described as reversible. Catherine noticed comments, and Catherine understood that those margins hinted at competing authority, warning against allowing Kensington Palace to become the only center of power. A worried aide had passed the papers along. Charles asked whether Camilla personally knew. Charles was now confronting the possibility that Charles's own withdrawal had triggered planning inside another household before Charles had finished defining the transition. Anne said the documents showed discussions through Camilla's household but did not prove how much Camilla had approved. William wanted an immediate confrontation. William could already see how easily silence might be weaponized against him later. Charles stopped William. Charles knew a corridor explosion could become a spectacle, and that was where a medical retreat became a palace power struggle. 20 minutes later, Camilla entered. Charles sat at the head of the table. William stood near the fireplace. Catherine sat opposite Camilla. Charles asked whether Camilla's staff had considered an advisory council after his withdrawal. Camilla called it preparation, not ambition. Camilla argued that her experience beside Charles mattered, and that removing Camilla's office from every serious decision would create disruption. Then Camilla made the request: amend the order. Let Camilla retain influence over banquets, appointments, patronages, and the public program, while William handled constitutional business and Catherine represented the crown beside William. Catherine asked one question: who wins when William and Camilla disagree? Camilla answered that Charles's wishes should guide them. That answer exposed the flaw. Charles was stepping away precisely because Charles could not keep settling every dispute. Anne slid forward the page describing William's authority as reversible. Charles rejected the amendment. Camilla turned toward William and asked whether this was what William wanted. William answered that William had not written the order. Charles had. Camilla left without accepting the decision. Charles asked whether Camilla's household could challenge the order. The advisor warned Charles that delays could weaken William and drag Charles back into conflict. William refused humiliation. Charles called the transfer necessity, not surrender. Catherine demanded clarity. William's decisions had to stand, and Catherine's program could not be rewritten privately. Camilla wanted influence. William needed authority. Catherine needed protection. Charles ordered one command structure. Advisors removed consultation rights. William received audiences, appointments, and long-term planning. Catherine received banquets, receptions, and the program. Anne quietly watched Charles read every line. Charles reached the page and personally wrote that no authority granted by the order could be challenged by the Queen's household. William read it twice. Catherine looked toward Anne. Anne understood. Charles signed, Anne witnessed, and Charles sent the copy to Clarence house. Camilla read the restriction and called Camilla's staff. Camilla asked whether it could be softened, but Charles had written it. Camilla refused to stand beside Charles while William and Catherine were presented as the center. Buckingham Palace rushed the announcement. Charles insisted on speaking so nobody could claim William forced the transition. Charles would announce William's responsibilities and Catherine's ceremonial role. Camilla asked Charles to reconsider if Camilla appeared beside Charles. Charles refused. Camilla canceled the car. Anne arrived, then William and Catherine. Camilla still stayed away. Charles warned William that William would invite theories. Catherine stared at two ceremonial chairs. Charles walked out alone. Charles said recovery required distance from daily duties. Charles named William, then Catherine. William would handle audiences, appointments, and long-range direction. Catherine would oversee banquets, receptions, ceremonial presentation, and the public program. Charles never mentioned Camilla. At Clarence house, Camilla watched William and Catherine receive responsibilities Camilla believed should still involve Camilla. Back at Buckingham Palace, William approached Charles, bowed, and promised Charles that William would honor the reign. Catherine joined William and Charles. Anne watched. Charles left, and William and Catherine moved toward the two chairs. William sat, Catherine followed. Britain saw what looked like a transfer. Camilla switched off the television. Camilla's title remained. Camilla's influence did not. William examined the original order and noticed Charles had placed the restriction above the royal seal. William carried it to a private room where Charles waited. Catherine stood beside briefing papers, and Anne held another sealed folder. William asked Charles whether the restriction was necessary. Charles said doctors forced Charles to reduce the workload, but Camilla's preparations forced Charles to define the boundary. Without the line, William's appointments and Catherine's decisions could still be questioned through Clarence house, forcing Charles to arbitrate privately. Charles told William there could be no rival court. William understood. Catherine understood the cost. Anne said the line would be studied because Charles had stopped trying to satisfy everyone. Charles asked William for one promise: no campaign against Camilla. William agreed. Catherine supported dignity without surrender. Anne placed the second folder before Charles. Charles asked whether Anne could wait. Anne said no. The file concerned Camilla's household privileges and residences, including Clarence house and Buckingham Palace. Beside Camilla's name was a handwritten date for when Camilla's unrestricted palace access could end. William had not seen it. Camilla had not seen it. Even Charles appeared unprepared. Charles looked at William. Catherine looked at Camilla. William watched Charles. Catherine watched William. Camilla watched Charles. William watched Catherine. Charles watched Camilla. William watched Catherine. Charles watched William. Catherine watched Charles. William watched Catherine. Charles watched William. Catherine watched Camilla. William watched Charles. William watched Catherine. William watched William. William watched William. William. The next battle was measured not in years, but days.